This video was brought to you by Nebula. Support the channel and get more TLDR by signing up. The link is in the description. Over the last few weeks, Russian forces have focused almost exclusively of capturing what remains of the Luhansk Oblast, and specifically the cities of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. But, as we detailed in our last Ukrainian video, things haven't been going brilliantly for the Russian army on this front so far. And that trend continued over the weekend, as Ukrainian forces staged successful counterattacks in Severodonetsk and Kherson. So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at recent developments, what might happen next, and whether Western unity can hold on long enough. So before we get into the most recent developments, a quick update. After their early failures in February and March, the Russian army has stopped going for speedy mechanized assaults across the entirety of Ukraine, and instead has resorted to grinding artillery-led advances focused almost exclusively in Donbass. In some sense, this new strategy does play to Russia's strengths. They've got a lot of artillery, and the slower pace of advance puts less strain on their substandard logistics operation. Nonetheless, it does mean that the pace of this war has slowed to a trickle, with Russian forces making gains of, at most, a few kilometers a day. As such, over the last week or so, Russian forces have been focused on the towns of Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, the two remaining Ukrainian holdouts in the Luhansk Oblast, which are separated by a river. Originally, it looked like Russian forces wanted to move north from Popasna, to cut off supply lines and surround Ukrainian forces in the city. But this plan was scuppered after the advance from Popasna, known as Popasna Flour, ended up slowing to a halt last week. Russian forces then apparently decided to just go ahead with a full frontal attack, with most Russian forces coming from Rybizny, a small town to the north of Severodonetsk that was captured by Russian forces in April. Originally, it looked like this Russian offensive was successful, because after a heavy barrage of artillery on Wednesday last week, the governor of Luhansk stated that Russian forces had taken control of 70% of Severodonetsk, and therefore Ukrainian forces retreated into defensive positions in western Severodonetsk and Lysychansk. However, the Ukrainian army claimed this was always a part of their plan, and that their new defensive positions were better fortified than their old ones. But at the time, military analysts on Twitter were skeptical and assumed that Russian forces would soon take the entirety of Severodonetsk. However, unfortunately for Putin, this isn't what ended up happening. Over the weekend, Ukrainian forces successfully staged a costly counterattack, and on Sunday, the Luhansk governor claimed that Ukrainian forces had reversed nearly half of the Russian gains and now controlled about 50% of the city. Then there were conflicting reports that came out on Monday, with some suggesting that Ukrainian forces had retreated and others suggesting that they were still in control of the city. As of Tuesday morning, though, it looks like the battle for Severodonetsk is still ongoing. In purely humanitarian terms, though, this is a tragedy. Russia has apparently resorted to using reservists from its Second Army Corps, which suggests that casualties in the city are very high. And Zelensky himself has admitted that Ukraine is currently losing about 500 soldiers a day. Now, why is this happening? Well, some of the Russian struggles in Severodonetsk are probably attributable to the fact that while artillery might be a good way to make slow but steady progress, it also ends up turning a city into rubble, which leaves you open to counteroffensives, because rubble just doesn't provide the same defensive advantages as a built-up urban environment. Basically, and as you probably would expect, it's just harder to take cover in the ruins of a building without a roof than it would have been before it was destroyed. But that's not Russia's only issue. Once Ukrainian forces were fighting the Russians in close quarters and around the city, the Russians just couldn't rely so heavily on artillery without running the risk of friendly fire. The point you're making is that while Russia's new reliance on artillery has its advantages, it also has its disadvantages, and these were made more than apparent in Severodonetsk. Okay, so we now understand what's happening in Severodonetsk, but what happens next? Well, obviously we can't say for sure, but it looks likely that Russia will eventually take the city. According to reports, both sides are now relying on constant artillery, and the Russians just have more firepower in this respect. Nonetheless, the fact that the Russian army has struggled so much in Severodonetsk just doesn't bode well for Putin. Despite its overwhelming advantages in firepower and manpower, and its almost myopic focus on Luhansk, Russian forces are still struggling to make significant progress. And if Ukrainian forces can receive further military assistance from the West, this could tip the balance of power back in Ukraine's favor, especially if it allows them to compete with Russia's artillery. Russia will also likely find it difficult to move more forces to support their troops in Luhansk, because Ukrainian forces are still applying pressure in other areas. Ukrainian forces apparently staged some minor counteroffensives in Kherson over the weekend. And while it's unlikely that Ukraine will retake Kherson in the near future, this will nonetheless make it difficult for Russia to move any troops away from Kherson to support their primary efforts in Luhansk. Which leads us nicely onto the last part of this video. What can the West do? Well, since our last video, Biden has confirmed that the US will be sending medium-range rocket launcher systems to Ukraine, which will be able to strike targets up to 50 kilometers away. Putin responded to this by warning the West that if they send any weapon systems with longer ranges, as the Ukrainians are currently requesting, then Russia will strike, quote, targets that we have not yet struck. Which does sound worrying, which is probably why not everyone is as enthusiastic as Biden. One such concerned party is French President Emmanuel Macron, who on Friday provoked ire from Ukrainian authorities by suggesting that the West shouldn't, quote, humiliate Putin, essentially implying that the West needs to provide Putin with a diplomatic off-ramp. Not everyone agrees with this plan, though, and other European leaders have taken a different tack. On Tuesday, Estonia's Prime Minister said that any negotiations with Putin would be premature and urged the West to continue its support for Ukraine. So, ultimately, it increasingly looks like it will be the West who decide the outcome of this war. With the war more balanced than ever, Western military support, or lack thereof, really could make the difference, which makes the growing split between various NATO members even more nail-biting. In fact, you'll want to stay updated on this story as it plays out, so you should check out our show, The Daily Briefing. It's there where we run down the biggest stories each day to keep you in the loop in just minutes. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel or podcast by clicking the links below. But if you sign up to Nebula, you can get an extended version of the show every single day. That's a triple-length briefing every weekday. As you likely already know, Nebula is the streaming service that we've built with some of our creator friends, including all of these awesome people who are also on the platform. So if you sign up, you can get the extended daily briefing plus tons of other exclusive full-length TLDR videos, including our team's recent attempt at the British citizenship test and a tour of our new office, as well as all of our videos being ad-free. If you're interested and do want to sign up, then you'll want to use the link in the description to get the Nebula Curiosity Stream bundle deal. Here's how it works. If you sign up to Curiosity Stream, home to the best documentaries online, then you'll also get Nebula included absolutely free. That means it's less than $15 a year for both services. Curiosity Stream for high-quality documentaries, and Nebula for bonus TLDR content. And doing so also really supports the channel, so thanks for your help.